For those of you who don't know who Dr. Avery-Peck is, she's actually Matt Meadows' girlfriend. She's super
My claim to fame.
awesome. I'm really excited to meet her. And she's a licensed psychologist who specializes in a couple of things, one of them being social anxiety, OCD, I guess, anxiety in general. And we're so lucky to have her today. She's going to share some like resources with us and how to handle stress during the holidays. And I think I speak for everyone too when I say not just the holidays. This year has been pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really excited to have you here. And I see a couple
Thanks
more
so
people are
much. Yeah, I was saying to hear, like, I usually sit, on the opposite side of the wall from Matt. So I feel like I'm now a part of the crew. So it's nice to see you all. So today, I really want it to be just like open. So if you have questions along the way, if there's something that I'm talking about that you're like, this isn't helpful, let's talk about something else, just interrupt me, send messages in the chat, and we can really focus it around what all of your all needs are. That's totally fine. But a few things to start off. So just a little bit about me and who I am. So I did my undergrad training at Vanderbilt. I did my graduate training at Boston University, and then moved down to Florida for my residency. And I've been here ever since. And like was explained, I specialize in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention. So all those videos you see of people being, shown spiders and freaking out, that's what I do all day. But what I really do is help people retrain the way that they think about things and help them to understand how their thinking influences what they're feeling and therefore their behavior. So I'm hoping to bring some of that to you guys today, and just share a little bit about what that looks like. So today what I thought we would start off with and then leave it open to questions at the end. So supporting yourself during the holidays, how to support others. There have been a lot of great questions about how to find a therapist and how to find the right therapist. So I thought I'd offer a little bit of guidance on that. And then at the end, it's a town hall, just open it up to questions and things like that. So obviously this isn't therapy, but I'm more than happy to share recommendations in terms of what type of therapy would be good for a certain issue, or how to talk to a coworker, a family member about something that you're uncomfortable with, things like that. So we'll leave it open at the end. Okay. So just to start off, everyone has mental health. So I think that might seem like an obvious statement, but what's frustrating to those of us in the field a lot of times is that people tend to show up in therapy when there's a crisis, when they're at their wit's end, when they just don't know what to do. And the reality is that all of us have mental health, and all of us can use mental health checkups. We can all use support in different ways. And so acknowledging that it's okay to see a therapist. I think what I've been noticing about, millennial Gen Z culture is they're much more open about talking about the fact that they go to therapy, which is amazing. But there's obviously still a lot of stigma around it. So I love that something like 1909 is so willing to put it out there in the open. I talk to my clients about having my own therapist, things like that, and just to normalize it a little bit. So let's talk about how to support yourself during the holidays. So I come from a cognitive behavioral perspective. So what that means is that everything I do comes back to what am I thinking and what am I feeling and how is that influencing how I behave. So my number one piece of advice for anyone as they support themselves during the holidays, during any other time, is check in with yourself and try to figure out, what am I feeling to start out with? We're not going to be able to do anything until we can acknowledge what's going on with us. And so I think one thing that people really have a hard time with is making themselves aware of what they're feeling and the fact that that is totally okay. So I said to a client today, actually, who was telling me about how she'd been really weepy over the last couple of days. She was really upset by that. And I said, hey, it's okay to be sad. And then I had to check myself because I felt like that was kind of a stupid thing to say. And she said, no, like that, you're the first person who said that. Everyone else tells me you should think positively, right? Why aren't you excited about the COVID vaccine coming? Can't you see that there's an end to all this? No one lets me just be sad. I said, great. So first thing you can do is acknowledge that you're sad and tell yourself, it's okay that I feel sad right now. Once you do that, we can take the next step, which is what might I need given the fact that I feel sad? So I see someone is chatting me, right? So like sometimes it's easy to ignore what you're feeling or not take the time to pay attention to it because we just want to like stuff our feelings down and not deal with them. And I think there's also a worry that if we acknowledge what we're feeling, we're not going to be able to like overcome it. That if we let ourselves feel sad, we're going to suddenly like start crying hysterically in the middle of our meetings and not be able to recover. And that's another really good test is sort of ask yourself, did you ever have a crisis before a meeting and then go into that meeting and kill it? And the answer is probably yes, because we have this fear that emotions are just like a faucet that we can't turn off. And that's not the case. Emotions are exactly like a faucet that you have the ability to control. And at the times that it feels like we can't turn them off, it's usually because there's no consequences to not turning them off. We can cry hysterically when we're by ourselves because there's no reason to stop. But when there is a reason to stop, we have the ability to say, okay, I can do something else right now. And that's where the acknowledging your needs comes in. So if you're feeling really sad, you've got to figure out, what am I looking for here? Why am I so upset? What need am I looking to be filled? It could be feeling lonely. It could be really hungry. It could be needing some more alone time. And being able to acknowledge that then gets you to the final step of, okay, how am I going to meet this need in a more helpful way? And I always use the word helpful because there's lots of really unhelpful ways of getting your needs met, like screaming at your partner when you're really hungry, which is not something I ever do. I am completely in control of my emotions when I'm hungry. Or feeling like you're isolated from friends, and instead of texting them and saying, I'm feeling really lonely, do you think we could have a chat? Instead, digging into that isolation and saying, why aren't my friends hanging out with me? Why don't they text me? They must not like me. I'll just continue to separate myself. So you think that you're meeting that need, but you're actually doing it in a really unhelpful way because you're not responding in a way that might make you feel a little bit better. Okay. Any questions about this? As I'm talking, I'm realizing this is very quick. But if there's any particular questions about this type of thing and how to support yourself, I'm more than happy to sort of stop here for a minute and answer any questions. So Shayna wrote just something about like people giving the impression of getting stuck in sadness. And that's so accurate. And not just sadness. Another client was saying to me the other day, the message that if you're anxious or depressed, that you might be unsafe. So even more so that like if you let yourself be sad, there's a potential that you could be a harm to yourself, or that if you're really anxious, that you could do something crazy and be a harm to someone else. And that's just not an accurate representation of humans. Humans at the end of the day are under control of their own behavior, even when we're incredibly sad and incredibly anxious. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to type it, but I realized as I was typing it, it made no sense. So something I've done that's helpful, like you were saying, acknowledging how you're feeling. So what after that can you do to feel better? Or like, how long is it too long? It's like, oh, I can't be sad for the full day. Or it's like, okay, I let myself feel it. Yeah. How do I proceed forward?
That's a great question. And this is where I tell the client, like, you're really going to hate me and my answer, because my job is not to force the feeling to change or be different and go away. And that the reality of the way our minds and bodies work is that letting a feeling be there and not responding to it as anything bad or negative or unhelpful is what's going to make it go away. And so for my work, that usually relates to anxiety. So when someone is approaching something scary, if they say to themselves like, oh my gosh, this is so scary, I can't do this, it's terrifying, when is this feeling going to stop? they've signaled to their brain, you can't handle this, you should be scared. And that prolongs the amount of time they're going to be scared. And the same goes for sadness. If you feel sad and you say to yourself, when is this going to end? What if this is too sad, right? What if I've wallowed, or what if I'm depressed? What if I've been here for too long? You've attributed like this negative valuation of a feeling that means it's more likely to be there with this negative association. And so your job is to not label feelings as good or bad or positive and negative. It's being aware of what you're feeling and acknowledging, like, I can do anything with any feeling. So for me in my work, that's usually being anxious is not an excuse not to do things. Neither is being sad. And so as opposed to being afraid that you're in a feeling for too long, trusting that whatever the feeling is, it's there for a reason, and it will go away in the right amount of time, whatever that is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool. Awesome. Other questions? So I see there was a comment just about anxiety can help and hurt. I think that's just a great explanation for what anxiety is. Like, anxiety fundamentally is there to protect you. Every one of us has an alarm system for the purpose of protection. And unfortunately, our bodies are a little too smart for their own good, and they can start to try to protect you from things that are not supposed to be scary or dangerous. So I see a lot of clients with obsessive compulsive disorder where your body becomes conditioned to be uncomfortable or afraid around pretty much anything. I mean, from desks to light to certain colors to numbers to situations. And that's an example of your anxiety just protecting you from something in a way that's actually hurting you and making your life really tough. And it's tough because it's a coping mechanism, right? Anxiety is there to keep you safe, and we do things to keep ourselves safe because it feels good. And so to say, I need to try something different, even if it means that I might feel scared, can be really, really, really hard. Cool. Any other questions about this in particular? I talk a lot about anxiety because, that's what I do all day. But if there's other questions about like even anger, right? I think people sometimes feel like I'm going to get stuck in my anger for a long time. How do I get past that? But it's the same thing. You have to acknowledge that the feeling is there and trust that if you go about your life with that feeling, it's going to dissipate in time. Cool. Okay.
Can I actually bring something up?
Yeah,
Gaby?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No. Just something else that I think is very relatable for people also is, and this is something I've even experienced myself, is anxiety about being anxious, and that leading to like, panic attacks or things like that. So I just think it's a more abstract thing just because it's like a level removed. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts because I haven't heard them before specifically on that topic.
Well, you just wanted me to tell you that you're really the smartest then, because what you're afraid of is just fear itself, which is what I tell people that come with what's called panic disorder or just panic in general. Panic is ultimately a fear of being afraid because anxiety, your body responds, it feels out of control. And that's inherently scary. Your heart is racing, you're sweating. In my example, whenever I give talks, like I'm sweating, I get very nervous. And if I suddenly said to myself, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Why are you sweating? Are you having an attack? I've now triggered myself to be scared of something that's a normal process, right? Sweating. And so I do, when clients come with panic and things like that, the work is about being okay with being scared and doing exactly what we're talking about, not having a negative reaction. And that comes up. I always give this example of a client I had with social anxiety who objectively was doing fantastic, like had a job or had to speak with clients every day. They loved him. He would get great feedback. But after every interaction, he would spend around 30 minutes beating the crap out of himself for feeling anxious. Like, why you're so bad at your job? Why do you feel that way? You should be good at this by now. You're like, what type of person are you that you feel anxious talking to people? And that was the only thing that was continuing to keep him anxious. And I think that's what's so frustrating is, I mean, at this point, I've been giving talks for years. I still get nervous. I still sweat. I still get hot. I don't think there's nothing I can do to change my physical reaction, but I've worked really hard to just sort of accept that that's the way it's going to be. And so I don't feel overtly anxious. I just have that physical reaction, and it's a very different experience, and it makes it easier to do things. Great question, Matthew. Anything else on this? I want to jump to talking about supporting others, and I'm sure more things will come up. So jump back if you guys want to. So supporting a friend, supporting others. So when Shana and I talked, I think one of the things she acknowledged is, as I think is a part of our culture, we're trying so hard to be there for other people, be open about mental health. But honestly, like most of us just don't know how to do that. We're not taught how to be supportive. And we're also not taught sort of like where the line is between supportive and needing to set boundaries around like, this isn't something I can help with anymore. And so listen, you guys are going to be the most amazing friends after this, because I'm going to give you like the only thing you ever need to do to support someone. And that is to validate them and not give any advice. That's it. And that when you first start out feels incredibly unsettling, because that is not what we are taught to do as humans. When someone comes to you with a problem, we are taught to try to help them fix it. And that feels really crappy when you've already been trying to fix it. Like most of the time, the problem that you're trying to solve, if it had an obvious answer, wouldn't you have fixed it already? And so when someone comes to you, most of the time, what they're really looking for is just for someone to hear them and for someone to say like, yeah, that sounds really hard. Thank you so much for sharing with me. That must have been really tough to come and talk about this hard thing. And what it's funny when people come for anxiety too, a lot of times you end up doing a bit of like relationship counseling too, because we don't live, in silos. We have families, we have friends. And so people say like, I just feel so uncomfortable. Like, it's like they're looking at me, waiting for me to solve this problem. And so my go-to question for them is just to say to your friend, like, how can I support you right now? Rather than taking a guess, ask them. And most of the time they're just going to say, just listening was really helpful. Right. Or, maybe another phone call next week. But when I worked at FAU, we would have a group therapy, and it was fascinating. The first session, what always would happen is someone would bring up a problem, and then every single person in the circle would give their solution and try to solve it. And you just see like the person getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it like feels like you're being attacked almost, because it's sort of like, right, okay, I'll try that, but okay, like, but that I already did that and it didn't work. Like, what's wrong with me that all your solutions, you seem to come up with all these obvious answers. What's wrong with me that I can't come up with a solution? And the reality is like, nothing's wrong with them. There's nothing to be solved here. It's just, we're looking for empathy. We're looking for validation, not for an answer. So definitely try that out in your own lives if you can. Oh, and I love Matt wrote down, like, just calm down. He has said that to me on a number of occasions, and he usually gets yelled at, because if we could just calm down, we would. So, your best bet is to say, I see very, very anxious people, and I offer their families, they can say to them, like, I see you're really upset right now. I can see, just repeat what they're saying to you. Repeat what you're seeing from them. I see you're really anxious. I see you're really upset. I will be here when you're ready to talk. I will sit with you. But the second you say, just calm down, you're going to get yelled at, because that's just, I wouldn't have a job if that were possible. So another relationship saving. Yeah, go ahead.
It's so funny because this is the same stuff that they tell you with like a kid, like, yep. And I learned it from my sister, who's an early elementary educator.
Yep.
And it's very much like when they're having a tantrum, I see that you're angry about this.
Yep.
Okay. let's be angry.
Yeah, exactly.
Safely. Like, but
Yeah.
it's literally, it's the same thing. Like, I see this is bothering. He's literally having a tantrum right now.
There you go. Perfect example. Well, because what you're saying, especially I am a behavioral therapist. So the things that work for kids, I mean, this is where, you know, we cut everyone down a few notches. Like, we're all just animals. Like, there's very obvious like rewards and consequences for behavior, and the behavior that's rewarded is going to increase, and the reward that has consequences is going to decrease. So when you want someone to calm down, it's negative reinforcement. Like, you're trying to take away the terrible physical feelings so that they'll do something more, which is calm themselves down. And so yelling at them right, is definitely not going to work, but showing them that they can do it, right? Like, come and sit, you know, I'll just be here, you know. And I don't tell people to take deep breaths. I do not tell people, you know, to drink some water, because when you get into panic treatment and real anxiety disorders, those things can become what we call safety behaviors. You don't need to take deep breaths to calm down. You're not really at risk of anything terrible happening. When you're ready to calm down, you will. But we don't like to see people in distress. So we want to take them out of it, whatever means necessary. Right? So it's really hard to watch your kid having a tantrum. You know, you want them to stop, they're upset, but you got to just let them do it and show that they can calm down on their own. Yeah. The other thing on here, just about boundaries with people who are coming to you for support. So my favorite analogy, when we all used to fly, when you're on a plane and they're doing the safety thing, who do they tell you to give the oxygen mask to first? Who gets the oxygen mask first, parents or kids?
Parents.
Why do parents get it first, Matthew?
Well, if you don't have the oxygen, then you won't be able to help others with their own oxygen.
Exactly. So that is the same for life. So if you are not okay and you're giving all of your mental resources to everyone around you, you are going to be ineffective at supporting everyone around you and more ineffective at supporting yourself. So I think, again, we feel really badly when we don't feel like we're helping, but there's nothing wrong with saying to someone, you know, I can tell how much you're struggling. I really want to be there to support you. Can I help you find someone else to talk to? Like, I don't have the mental resources, or, you know, you've come to me with this problem 3 or 4 times already. I don't think that I'm helping by allowing you to keep ruminating, talking again in circles about this same problem. Like, why don't we find some help together? And that's really hard to do. You know, I don't minimize how hard it is to feel kind of like you're rejecting someone who's asking for support, but you're not being selfish by saying, I need to take care of myself. It's a really important thing. Anything particular about helping friends, family members that are hard to do or feel uncomfortable that I can offer some support around?
I was just going to make I guess a thought or comment in that last part. And I know, Gaby and I talked about this in the beginning, but there's definitely, I realize for myself a point where I feel like I just don't know the best thing to give people advice for, because I'm not a counselor therapist. So I could give advice I think is great and is horrible, and that actually freaks me out sometimes, because, I know my limitations of, like, I can tell you my experience or what I felt, but, like, I'm not really, like, suited to give people mental health advice or, like, advice on certain things in their life, depending on what it is. So I think, like, coming to that realization has been hard for me, but also, like, important, and just saying, like, I might not be doing them a service by trying to provide advice.
Yeah, and I think that just comes back to me, like, you're wanting to offer advice because it feels like you have to solve the problem for them. And when, people are always very disappointed when they come to therapy and find out that your therapist is not going to tell you what to do. And so, mine is a little different because there are, like, very behavioral practices that we do for anxiety. But if you come to me with a problem, like, should I text this person or not? Should I take this job or not? You're not going to get an answer from me. You're going to get, let's talk through both options. Let's see how you're thinking, feeling, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm not giving you any advice. And as a, like, baby therapist, that was, like, the most impossible thing, because they're just, like, looking at you like, come on, like, tell me. And so I know that it feels the same in your regular lives when a friend comes, and you can give advice as a friend, but Shayna, it's just a great point. Like I deal with uncertainty, and teaching people uncertainty is okay, but people are probably going to you for reassurance. Like, tell me that what I think is a good idea is a good idea. And they're like, no, what? You don't know. You're just making it up. But that's sometimes enough for them to be like, okay, this is the direction we're going in, but it's false. You don't have any idea more than they do. Great point. Other thoughts on friends and things like that, supporting friends?
Well, like I can give a real world situation that I think is the opposite, Shayna. What you were saying is I have a couple of friends, and Gaby even knows about them, who I get sense that they were having issues, but they're like, we're not on that level of wanting to talk about it, but it's very clear that they have things that need to be addressed. And I feel like I should step in and say something, but Gaby, I'm just curious sort of what you think about helping someone who isn't asking for help, but it's clear that they may need it.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to comfort with asking hard questions. So I say this to you all the time, like, why didn't you ask about X, Y, or Z? Right? You know that this person, has a family member that's sick or is doing poorly in school. Why didn't you ask and say, hey, just wanted to check in? And usually the answer is just like, I don't know, it's uncomfortable. We don't talk about those things. So getting comfortable with discomfort and being okay with, like, you're not going to cause someone further distress by suggesting that they talk to someone. And so I think you're right. There's a fine line between telling someone that they need to go to therapy. Like, I don't think that most friends are necessarily on that level. It's my two best friends are psychologists, so we're on that level because we're psychologists. It's just what everyone does is goes to therapy. But starting before you're suggesting like needing support, just being okay with asking how they're doing for real, not the like surface level, yeah, everything's fine. But if you know something about them, you don't have to pretend to go along because you don't want to like bring it up for them, because they'll tell you, they'll say, yeah, I'm not really in the mood to talk about it. I'm talking about it with my other friend or with my parent or things like that. But yeah, it's hard. I think relationships, suggesting that your partner go to therapy is hard. Suggesting that you go as a couple can be hard. But my mindset too is like, if the reaction is so negative, that's information. We want to understand why the reaction is so negative. What is their brain telling them about why therapy is so terrible or scary? So that then we can continue to have that conversation and make it feel more comfortable within the discomfort. I don't really know if I answered the question, but close enough.
I'll actually share another thought on that too.
Yeah,
like I'm not good at this on the other end either, by the way, like sometimes asking questions that are uncomfortable. But I remember, when I was going through, a really difficult time after a death in my life, and some people would like come up and interact with me who obviously knew, and they like wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like, at first I was like really upset, and I was like, I can't believe they didn't mention this. Like, clearly it's a big deal. And then I just realized people are uncomfortable. And I remember asking somebody like, why don't you ask me? And they're like, well, I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to upset you. And I'm like, I'm thinking about it all the time anyways. Like, if you ask me, it's not bringing it up. But I know that's a personal thing for everyone. But I really was like more interested when people didn't ask me.
And Shayna, like, I wish that you had said that to me 4 days ago, because Matt will tell you, I just hung out with a friend who had a loss. And I said to him before I left, like, I hadn't seen this person in like 10 years, but I obviously knew about it. I knew the person that she lost. And I said to him, like, should I bring it up? And we were both like, she'll bring it up if she wants to talk about it. Right. And so that very worry, I mean, I'm a freaking psychologist, and my brain said to me, if you bring it up, she'll think that you're prying. She'll think that you're fishing for information because you're not close. She'll think that you'll say something wrong. You won't say it in a way that conveys empathy. And so I didn't say anything, and we had the conversation. And you're right. It's like this false, we both knew that I knew. And I literally hadn't seen this person in a while, but right, what was she be thinking about the fact that I didn't say anything, right? Is she thinking, that's so weird, you know, I wish she had, it would have been nice to be able to acknowledge it to this person, things like that. So I appreciate Shannon reflecting, like, it's for the most part, not out of like ill intent or malintent. It's like both of us are uncomfortable and not wanting to do the wrong thing. And so we just don't say anything at all.
Yeah. And again, I think I was like, right. And I think if people don't want to talk about it, there was times I would just say so. Like, I'm not really in the mood, but like, I would always appreciate if people ask, because otherwise it's like, you know what happened, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just going out, like the premise of it's always okay to ask, like people are advocates for themselves. Like they will tell you if they do or don't want to talk about something. And for the most part, you're not going, I trust that people for the most part will do so respectfully and that you're not going to hurt them. And now I'm like, I want to go back in time and have a conversation with my friend, but maybe next time, you know. Cool. Anything else about friends, boundaries? I'll keep going, and there's time for like lots of time for questions.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to know, is it okay to tell like a friend like who's struggling with anxiety or depression that you're worried about them? It's okay to say that?
I think so. Absolutely. I think as you know, I trust that you would do it respectfully, right? That you would say, hey, I just wanted to check in. I've noticed this or this. Is there anything I can do to support you? Right. I think that's similarly to what Shana was saying. I bet your friend probably knows that you know something is off. And so calling it out into the open, it will feel helpful, hopefully. And if they have a terrible reaction, you just say, okay, I didn't have any bad intentions. I just wanted to make sure that I was supporting you. I think there was another question too in the middle.
I had a question. I do this. I'm stuck in a cycle where because time sucks right now. Like I'll be like, I haven't talked to my dad in like a month, and then I texted him Friday. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's just me that is completely crazy. And then, but what I've been trying to start doing is sticking to that rule of like I get stuck in a cycle where I'm like, oh, I miss this friend. I should send them a text. And then I start typing out this text and I write it 10 times. And I'm like, now I'm awkward. I'm done. And then I don't text them. And then I feel like a day later, I'm like, I should have sent them a text. It might have brightened their day. I don't, and it just, and then I feel like a bad friend. Yeah. And you like go down this shame spiral and I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. That's my November, December.
There you go. So I'm just going to like extrapolate and get bigger from the example, which is our brains tell us false things all the time and we believe them and we make ourselves feel worse by listening. So you were writing a text, your brain said, this is weird. And so then you're like, now I feel weird because I'm writing something weird. If I stop writing the text, I won't have to feel weird anymore. But instead I'll feel guilty because now I still haven't done the thing. So ultimately, like, your job is to acknowledge, like, I feel really weird about this, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? Like, wouldn't it be awesome? Like, how would I feel if I got a random text for a friend? I think I'd feel awesome. And even if it's weird, so what, right? What's the worst that could happen? So our jobs in general are to evaluate our thoughts in a way that's more accurate. And we are so bad at this, like just the worst. We mind read, we catastrophize, we predict the future. We can't do any of those things. But if you call it out so that it doesn't prevent you from behaving in a way that's going to negatively affect you, you'll change the whole cycle, right? So I always go to like fix the thinking, not fix, but like change the thinking. That will help you change your behavior and that will change how you feel in the long run. Cool. Okay, so I'll move on, but again, more questions. There'll be time for chatting too. So how do I know when it's time to see a therapist? Basically, when you think to yourself, should I see a therapist? So I am like pleasantly surprised that it seems more and more that, you know, people younger than myself and people within my own age range are so willing to go. Like, it doesn't seem to be as taboo as it once was. That's obviously very different within certain cultures. I think there's still a stigma around men going to therapy, things like that. There's just a lot of stigma. Parents don't want their children to go. I still get asked all the time, you know, will colleges find out that my child saw you for their anxiety disorder? And it's like, what? Like, you no, but you need to come and see me as well to talk about that. So any time is an okay time to see a therapist. And as I started with, it doesn't have to be when there's a crisis. So it's honestly like, it's very frustrating to me when the first time someone comes to me is when they're like no longer functioning. It's, you know, I wish that we made it easy enough that the first time someone felt panicked or overwhelmed or whatever it is, it was just a click away of, you know, here's who I can see. I mean, when you've been sick for 2 or 3 days, you're not waiting years and years to go and see your doctor. I got to figure this out. And I hope that eventually we can get to a place where therapy is the same, but right now it's not. But I hope at least within this group, we can just encourage anyone to see a therapist whenever they want. And it even, I mean, yeah, just sharing personally, like my best friend told me, you know, before I moved to Florida, like, hey, you could. And I was like, I don't know, it's weird. And it's like, that's what I do. So that stigma still exists. But now that I do it, I'm like, I love it. It's great. Everyone should go. Other important things. Oh, I already said all this. So the other thing about why it's important to go before the crisis is just, at least the work that I do involves a lot of practice and trying to do things differently in the world. That's really hard to do when you're already at your brink. So it's so much easier. You know, people sometimes come in and they're like, hey, I had a great week. I don't have a lot to talk about. I'm like, awesome. Now we can actually get some work done because we can't do anything when you're just so overwhelmed. We have to help you basically be okay first before we can get to the practice of, you know, trying new things, like texting someone when you think that they're going to think that you're weird, or, you know, doing things differently at home or going on a date or whatever it possibly is. We can't do those things when we're super overwhelmed. And then just some general information on finding a therapist. I know even from my own search, it can be really overwhelming. So I tend to encourage people to start with like, what's the issue? And then what type of therapy? So I'm not going to go through all this, but just so y'all have a sense of, there's different types of therapy for different types of problems. So if someone said to me, like, I have an anxiety disorder and I've been going to a talk therapist, I'd be like, I just cannot believe that person let you see them. We have an evidence-based treatment for anxiety, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention. So if you do choose to find someone, you can ask them questions like, what's your training? How do you work with this? They should have all the right answers. And so like, for example, someone dealing with a trauma might want to do trauma-focused CBT. They might want to see an EMDR specialist. They might want to do some acceptance and commitment therapy. For relationships or family issues, you might ask for someone who specializes in couples therapy, emotion-focused therapy, things like that. So there is a lot of overlap, but some of them are just like, you do not send someone with an anxiety disorder to a talk therapist, like who's doing like psychoanalysis. Like that's just not okay. But for other things, there can be some overlap. This is how I found my therapist, honestly. So Psychology Today is the absolute go-to. The way it works is that you have a profile, they confirm that you're licensed. And so I filtered by the state. So the way licensure works for psychologists and other mental health professionals is you have to generally be licensed by the state and only see clients within the state you're licensed. So I knew I wanted someone in Florida. I wanted someone not in South Florida because of just knowing a lot of people. So I filtered by Florida. I filtered by the issue. I honestly picked based on the picture. I liked the way that the person looked and I liked their description. And you can always ask for a 10-minute consult. So at the end of the day, being comfortable with the person is going to be the most important thing. And so if you get on the phone with them and it's not flowing, you don't like what they're saying, it's uncomfortable. All right, so you don't have to see them. And we were talking at the start about it's really hard to fire your therapist, but you're allowed to fire your therapist. So you can say, hey, like, I'm not sure that this is what I want. Like, could you offer other referrals? You can also kind of ghost. I don't prefer that, but like you also don't have to make another appointment. And then find someone else. I mean, I think people feel stuck because they don't want to have to start again. But if you're feeling stuck in your therapy, you can also tell that to your therapist and have that conversation, and hopefully fix it or find someone new. That's okay as well. And I also, there's a resource guide I sent to Shayna that has some specific referrals that I recommend, as well as some sliding scale referrals, because in South Florida, a lot of people don't accept health insurance, unfortunately, as well as just some other referral type things. So let's open it up. What else can I offer you guys in terms of support, other questions, things like that?
I had a quick question. Oh, you're here. Sorry, you can jump in if you want to.
My question was just, how does the 10-minute consult work? Is that like a service, or like, is it a certain amount?
No, so the way, I mean, it's going to depend on the therapist. The way people get to me is they'll either send me an email through Psychology Today or call my my Google Voice number, and I just call them back. And I wish it was only 10 minutes sometimes. Matt will tell you sometimes it's like 45 minutes, but my feeling is that the good therapists and psychologists want to take the time to get to know you, because I don't want to see a client that I'm not a good fit for, because that's not fun for me. I don't know if fun is the right word, but I'm not going to take someone's money or do them a disservice if I'm not the right fit. So a good example of that is a dad called me last week he wanted me to see his daughter whose mother is very sick. And he picked me because he liked my website. And I said, listen, like, I'm not turning you down, but I'm saying there are better options out there. Like, yes, I could do it. Go see if these two people can do it first, because they are trained in that specific thing. Whereas we're all trained in everything, but this is not my specialty. It would be like, you broke your foot, you see your doctor first, and then they say, go to the orthopedist, because that's their real thing. So if you reach out to someone and they're like, oh yeah, just make an appointment, and you say, oh, can we talk? And they say no, like, run. So people should be willing to have a quick call with you, and they'll schedule that with you.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? I'm going to close this. Actually, no, I guess I'll keep it open. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
No. I guess my question, it was sort of a leading question, which is just because anxiety, I think is very pervasive within the population, and you specifically specialize in CBT. Can you give an example of like, I don't know if you can, but like a practical walkthrough of how you would address a common, sort of the most common, I don't know, anxiety experience, or how you would address their issues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the most common, but I think in general, so when someone comes in and says like, I have a really hard time with social situations. So basically the first appointment is to get to know you, we find out everything, but my style is we've got to understand the way that people think first. So I really recommend doing thought logs. Like anytime you feel any strong emotion, be it really happy, really sad, really anxious, you jot down what you're thinking. And that is a wealth of information, because the majority of the time when you have an anxiety disorder, the thinking that you're doing is disordered in some way. And disordered sounds like kind of a clinical term and a bad term, but it's not. We all engage in distorted thinking. And we're really, really terrible at noticing it. So Matt will tell you, like, I bought a new car last week and I couldn't sleep because I spent all night thinking that it was going to get stolen and I was going to go bankrupt and couldn't pay for it. And I knew that those things weren't true, but I was just like going through all the ways in which they were, and was really stuck in how I was thinking. So if I was my own psychologist, I would say, like, write that thought down, right? Like, your car is going to get stolen from the roof. Like, okay, that sounds like catastrophizing. Doesn't seem like really all that likely. And if it did happen, could you handle it? And that would be step one, like fighting against that thinking, trying to encourage different ways of different pathways in your brain of like, we don't have to jump to the worst case scenario. We can jump to the second worst case scenario or alternative possibilities. And then the fun part is exposure therapy. So for pretty much every anxiety related disorder, there's some sort of a behavioral component. Usually it's related to avoidance. Avoidance feels really good. We're scared by something, so we just won't do it. And then we don't have to feel scared. So the behavioral component is helping people to do the things that are scary. So that could be everything from sending that text, even though you're nervous that it's going to look weird, to making a phone call and asking Dunkin' Donuts where the nearest Starbucks is, to like doing like a Zoom call with someone that you haven't seen in a while. And then for people, I mean, there's just an unlimited number of anxiety related thoughts that people could have, but you know, like some of the strangest exposures I've done is like I've gone ice skating with someone who was having obsessions related to like if I ice skate, then something bad is going to happen to my family member. I don't know, Matt, what other weird ones have I done? I've done a lot of weird things.
I was listening.
Yeah, pre-COVID, are they in the chat? Pre-COVID, I did a lot of kind of gross things that I can't do anymore. But what were you listing that I did?
No, I said paying with pennies for a meal.
Paying with pennies.
Driving related stuff.
Yeah, I've done driving exposures.
Flying,
yeah, flying is tough. We usually use virtual reality and then try to get people on a plane. But yeah, it's, if you think about the things that, I mean, we all have stuff that scares us. So if you think about the thing that scares you and then how you avoid it, the therapy is about doing the opposite. Yeah. And I see you hear I put down that she hates flying. Like the reason people typically hate flying is either because they're afraid of the plane crash or they're just afraid they're going to panic on the plane. And I would say the latter is more common, that they know the plane isn't going to crash, but they're so unsettled on the plane that they hate that feeling. And so then they don't want to do it. So the treatment ends up being more about what Matt was talking about, like fear of fear, as opposed to the actual flying part, which is good because it's easier to do exposure to panic than it is to actual flying and things like that.
Yeah. I always have people like, and I have friends who have parents who are pilots, mm-hmm. Like, you're fine. And I'm like, I know I'm fine.
Right. That's not helpful.
I'm like, every single time, like sometimes if there's turbulence, like I will accidentally let out a yelp and people will look at me and it's so embarrassing. So I try to control it. Mm-hmm. But I did have a question. Yeah. Do you have any tips for sleeping? Just like this year with all the craziness. Yeah. I'm having a hard time going to bed and I've been trying different things and I'm like, oh, this isn't working. Or it's like, should you just keep on trying something? Like maybe I'm looking for like a miracle fix or something and that's not the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I work with people that have some sort of, if you want like real, like having insomnia, there is an actual cognitive behavioral treatment for that, which involves not like tracking how much you're sleeping and not letting yourself get into bed until literally that amount of time. So if you're someone who's only sleeping like 3 hours a night, you say, I want to wake up at 8. That means I literally am not allowed to go to bed until 5 a.m. And then you start adding time, but that's for like extreme sleep cases. For those of us in general who just feel unsettled, I think the first thing I would want to know is what is getting in the way of the sleeping. And I would argue that most of the time it's thinking, right? That thinking and thinking and thinking. And we can change the word thinking to ruminating, which is can't turn your brain off, trying to solve problems that either don't exist or don't really have solutions or don't need to be solved. And I remind people that rumination is possible to pause. Like you can say to yourself, which I tried to do a couple weeks ago with the car, is say, I can't solve this problem right now. I'm going to feel uncomfortable, but I can lie here in bed and see what happens. I think people end up getting frustrated when things don't work, and then they start worrying that they can't sleep, and then they put all their emphasis on all the things that should be working and then get upset that they're not working. And we get into this additional worry cycle about why it isn't working.
I'll be completely honest and vulnerable on this call. It's been more like not anything crazy, like I do sleep, but I've been trying to go to bed earlier and I can't. Yeah. And this has never happened to me before. Now I'm like, now I get anxious about not going to bed. So I'll try to go to bed. I'm like, oh my gosh, how long is it going to take for me to go to bed? And then I'll like look at my clock and I'm like, it's been 20 minutes. Oh my gosh. So that's where I'm at.
So I appreciate you being so vulnerable. And right, if you look at the thought, right, the thought is anxious in and of itself. Oh my God, why haven't I fallen asleep? And the answer is like, honestly, like, it doesn't matter that you haven't fallen asleep, right? If you can say to yourself, like, I'll fall asleep when I fall asleep. Right? Worst case is I'm tired tomorrow. You're not, I think people, when they hear about like cognitive therapy, they're like, you're just going to tell me to think positively. I don't tell people to think positively. Let's think more helpfully. So which is more helpful, to think, I'm just going to fall asleep when I fall asleep. We'll see how long it takes, versus, oh my God, I'm never going to fall asleep. This is horrible. So it sounds like, right, putting all that pressure on yourself to fall asleep within a certain amount of time, and not being willing to just kind of accept, like, yeah, maybe I'll fall asleep later tonight, right? Here's where the acceptance of feelings, like, I'm feeling a little anxious tonight. That's okay. I'm just going to lie here and we'll see what happens, see how it feels. So like taking that pressure off of, your body will sleep when it's ready. It doesn't sleep when then we put all the pressure on and say, oh my God, I can't do this.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. I haven't even thought to think that. So I'm going to try that out and just.
Okay, awesome.
You're right. The worst that happens is that I'm tired the next day, and then maybe that'll help me go to sleep earlier.
Yeah. And Shayna just put down also, right? Like, she puts the worst case scenario and then asks if she can handle it. That's my go-to also. For some people, that does not work, because they will say, no, that worst case is going to happen. So you just got to check yourself on that. But yeah, you're saying that one works for me for sleep. Like I would stress myself out. This for me was also being late. So I say to myself, like, the worst case is I'm a few minutes late, and like nothing, Matt's laughing because I make him very angry sometimes when I'm so stressed. But like, the worst case is we're a few minutes late and I can handle that. And like, literally, what's the worst case? Someone says to me, oh, you're a few minutes late. And like, what's the likelihood? So that you're challenging your catastrophic thinking, right? Identifying what your brain thinks the worst case is, and then acknowledging, like, it's really not that bad. I could deal with it if it came up.
Thank you.
Hey, Gaby, can I? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. No, I was just going to say on that topic here, I've had a very similar sort of situation where I'm like, something will trigger me during the day. It's typically related to like business or whatever, and I'm trying to go to sleep and I just can't, and I'm like ruminating about it, whatever. So something I started doing, which I was inspired by a book to do, was just start meditating, or trying to meditate. And it's like super hard in that moment, obviously, but that's like the whole point of the meditation, is like you get better at acknowledging your thought and then sort of letting it go. And so for me, doing that, the worst case is I just meditated for like half an hour, maybe successfully, maybe not. The best case is I just fall asleep because I'm trying to meditate or whatever. So I don't know, it may be worth trying. I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying like sleep meditations, but then like, you guys are going to laugh at me. Then like 15 minutes into the meditation, I'm like, what if this doesn't work? But I think I've been so negative about it. Even like what you just said, it's like worst case scenario, if I couldn't go to bed, like I actually just meditated. So thanks guys. I love this like town hall type thing.
And I would also say to Matt's point about like solving a business problem at the wrong time. So I think we can all relate to the COVID related worries. So I'll have like a sore throat by the end of the day from talking all day. And I'll say to myself, like, all right, well, you're not going to do anything about this right now. So let's see how we feel tomorrow. So you can like, that's how we pause rumination, is making this active decision to be like, there's no solving I can do of the fact that my throat is sore right now. Like, we're just going to have to wait. And then it takes the pressure off to solve this big problem. So Matthew, in the middle of the night, when you're like, I have to solve this business thing, it's like, well, clearly not going to do anything about this right now. I can check tomorrow and see how it goes. I think there was another question too, with someone else.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to, friends, loved ones, things like that, about suggesting things. And I know this is kind of like, I don't know if there might not be an answer for this, but if you see someone who has habits that are unhealthy and causing them harm. So let's say like a substance abuse habit or something like that, and it's causing them harm, but you also like see that maybe they don't want to deal with it because they don't want to stop that. That's really hard. And I don't, I don't know if there's a great way to suggest help when you kind of realize somebody likes that habit.
Yeah, so I think this actually comes back to Saida's question about like, is it okay to say that you're worried about someone? And so I'll say the same thing. Like, if you have a concern, you can say to them, hey, I've noticed X, Y, or Z, and I have concerns. ultimately though, you're going to have to decide your role in supporting them in their habit or not. So this comes up, I don't deal with substance abuse, but let's say like contamination related exposures. I have kids who want to shower for like 6 hours, or people who are using massive amounts of toilet paper, tissues, things like that. And the parents have to learn, you can't support them in that behavior because it's not healthy for them. So if it's someone who has a drinking problem or isn't acknowledging it's a drinking problem, you have to decide whether when they say, hey, do you want to go out and get drinks, whether you feel comfortable continuing to be a part of that. And depending on your relationship, you can say, I mentioned to you that I was worried about you. It's obviously up to you whether you access some help. And I also can't support you in going out and getting drinks. Like, I'm happy to go get coffee. I'm happy to go for a walk. I keep using the word but is an eraser, but says everything I said doesn't count. This is the important part, and completes both. I can't do that with you. I'm not, it's not angrily, not harmful. It's just, if you want to support them in a different way, you're not going to accommodate their habit. That's not so healthy.
Okay. So in the shower example,
Yeah.
like, are the parents supposed to shut off the shower? I'm just curious.
So honestly, it's easier with the younger kids because they can do that, right? They can just take the kid out of the shower and turn it off. For the older kids, I tell parents they can turn off the hot water, but it gets harder as they get older, right? There are fewer consequences. So when I used to work in Boston at an intensive program for kids. So we would tell parents, like, the kids have to pay for the toilet paper with their own money. So you can't physically not give them toilet paper, and like, they're going to find it. It's in the house and you obviously need it. It's going to be in your bathroom, but you can say, like, I'm taking it from your allowance. So you try to put in some sort of a consequence, and it seems really mean, right? But you can't accommodate these behaviors that, again, it's like a coping mechanism. They want to shower for 7 hours, but making them shower for 4 hours is not actually harmful to them, even though they're going to be really upset by that. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'll tell you, contamination is my least favorite because it's just the hardest to break the cycle of, because it's all the time, right? And you do feel dirty. It's terrible. Bit of a tangent. What else? Oh yeah, any other questions? So if there's any last questions, I'll just jump to this last slide. I think Shana's going to send this around, but if you, I just threw on here my contact information, 2 of my colleagues who are fantastic, as well as a couple of resources for sliding scale and things like that. And then the Psychology Today website. But also, people reach out to me through Matt sometimes to say, like, hey, can you ask Gaby if she has any recommendations? More than happy to do that, even if it's not me, because you feel uncomfortable, because they're like, that's totally fine. I'm more than happy just to direct you to the right place. I didn't put a lot of psychiatry referrals on here. That can be like a whole disaster in and of itself, but I'm happy to direct people to those locations as well. If you're wanting to use your insurance, go to your insurance website, print out a bunch of people, and even send it to me. I can tell you if I know anyone. But my hope is in the future it won't be so difficult to access support, but at least hopefully this can be a bit of a start. But thanks everyone. Any last questions?
Thank you.
No problem. This is so great. I feel like one of the crew now. Thanks, guys. That's awesome.
Totally one of the crew. Thank you.
No
I really like that 10-minute consultation suggestion, by the way, for any, like, I wish I would have done that, because I love my counselor now, but in the beginning I definitely went to somebody and it was awful.
Yeah.
Like the worst.
You are allowed to interview your therapist. Like, it's someone you're going to have to, it's not, I think we get away with medical doctors being like not super friendly, things like that, but you're going to be telling this person a lot of really personal stuff. So you can glean a lot from 10 minutes, even just like how they are on the phone. So
very good advice.
Cool. And thank you. Yeah. I said, I only thought there was like couples and like relationship therapy, and then everything else was just like therapy.
Nope, there are really specific niches. Like even this is like the thing I put on the slide is like not an exhaustive list. And you want to make sure you're doing the right thing for the right problem. It's hard. No one knows that, you know.
Love it. Love the resource page you made for us.
Nice. I told Matt
Yes.
I did the content, but he made it look pretty. So
that's nice. I did put it in the chat just so you all know if you want this resource guide. I dropped it in there, and then I'll also put it in Slack.
cool.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Gabby. Thanks for Matt, too, for
Thank
helping
you.
take a random comment on a call and turning it into this awesome experience.
No problem. And I just threw my other contact info on here also. That's my direct phone number if anyone wants. My Instagram, which I try to be active on, but it's like the worst, and my email. So reach out if anyone has any other questions.
Awesome. Are you okay with us sharing your information out
Absolutely.
to the community? Okay.
Go for it.
All right. We'll share the resource list of this out to everyone.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.